"Step out of the vehicle, ma'am." The words cut through the cool evening air before Danielle Brooks had even finished lowering her driver's window. She looked up slowly, the fading orange glow of the North Carolina sunset reflecting across the polished hood of her dark blue sedan and the mirrored sunglasses of the white police officer standing beside it. His hand rested near his duty belt, not aggressive, but deliberate enough to make the message unmistakably clear. Danielle kept both hands on the steering wheel exactly where they could be seen. Years of legal training had taught her something few law schools ever wrote into textbooks. Sometimes the law wasn't the hardest part, being treated fairly was. She had been driving east along State Route 54 after leaving a legal strategy meeting that had stretched far longer than expected. The leather portfolio resting on the passenger seat contained documents that absolutely had to reach the governor's residence before 8 o'clock. Inside were final legal revisions for an emergency executive order scheduled to be signed the following morning, an order expected to affect thousands of families across the state. Every minute mattered. Yet here she was, parked on the narrow shoulder beneath flashing blue lights, watching two patrol officers exchange quiet glances as if they were still deciding why they had stopped her in the first place. Officer Ryan Collins took another slow step toward the window. His flashlight swept across the dashboard, then across the back seat, lingering just long enough to suggest he expected to find something unusual. There was nothing there except a folded umbrella, a reusable grocery bag, and a neatly pressed navy blazer hanging from a hook behind the driver's seat. Danielle noticed every movement without allowing her expression to change. Her grandmother used to tell her that panic only gave strangers permission to write your story for you. She refused to hand anyone that privilege. "License and registration," Ryan said flatly. Danielle nodded once and answered in a calm, measured voice. "Certainly, officer. Before I reach for anything, may I ask why I was pulled over?" The question seemed simple enough, yet an uncomfortable silence settled over the roadside. Officer Tyler Reed walked around the rear of the vehicle, shining his flashlight across the license plate before circling back toward the passenger side. Ryan looked briefly at his partner before answering. "Routine traffic stop." Danielle offered a polite smile that never quite reached her eyes. "I understand. Could you tell me what traffic law I violated?" Ryan hesitated. "You drifted near the center line." Danielle glanced ahead at the empty highway stretching almost a quarter mile in both directions. The pavement was dry. The lane markings were bright and freshly painted. She had activated cruise control at exactly 45 miles per hour nearly 10 minutes earlier. She knew because she remembered checking the dashboard clock immediately after leaving the conference center. Still, she said nothing. Slowly, she retrieved her driver's license and registration exactly as instructed, careful to narrate every movement before making it. Ryan accepted the documents, studying her license longer than necessary before looking back at her face. "Where are you headed tonight?" Danielle answered without hesitation. "To Raleigh." "Business?" "Yes." "What kind of business?" Another pause. Danielle could almost hear the ticking of the dashboard clock inside the quiet cabin. She understood the question behind the question. She had answered versions of it before. Instead of showing frustration, she met Ryan's eyes with quiet confidence. "Legal work." Ryan's eyebrows lifted ever so slightly. Tyler leaned closer to the passenger window, peering toward the leather portfolio lying beside her. Neither officer noticed the small digital recorder clipped discreetly beneath Danielle's dashboard, automatically documenting every word spoken inside the vehicle from the moment the emergency lights first appeared behind her. Danielle did not glance toward it. She simply rested her hands back on the steering wheel, slowed her breathing, and silently reminded herself of the promise her mother had repeated throughout her childhood. Never confuse dignity with surrender, because the strongest people are often the ones who stay calm long enough for the truth to arrive. Ryan Collins turned toward his patrol car without another word, Danielle's license still in his hand. The flashing blue lights painted long streaks across the asphalt, while the distant chorus of summer crickets continued as though nothing unusual was happening. Danielle remained exactly where she was, fingers resting lightly on the steering wheel, shoulders relaxed, her breathing slow and even. She had learned long ago that composure was not something you found in difficult moments. It was something you practiced long before they arrived. Growing up in Charlotte, North Carolina, Danielle Brooks had watched her mother leave home before sunrise every weekday, wearing the same pale gray maintenance uniform. Angela Brooks spent nearly 3 decades cleaning courthouse hallways, polishing marble floors, and emptying office trash bins after judges and attorneys had gone home. As a little girl, Danielle often waited quietly in the empty lobby after school, reading borrowed law books while her mother finished another shift. Most people walked past them without a second glance. Some nodded politely. Others never noticed them at all. Angela never complained. Instead, she would smile, place another heavy legal textbook on the polished bench beside her daughter, and whisper the same sentence every evening. Knowledge is the one thing nobody can take away from you. Danielle believed every word. She earned scholarships that carried her through college, graduated near the top of her law school class, and built a reputation not by speaking the loudest in the room, but by preparing more carefully than anyone else. Judges respected her precision. Colleagues trusted her judgment. Clients remembered the way she listened before she spoke. When Governor Michael Harrison assembled a new legal advisory team 18 months earlier, Danielle had been the youngest attorney selected. Not because of politics, not because of connections, because every recommendation described her the same way: steady under pressure, unwavering in ethics, and impossible to intimidate. Those qualities had carried her into rooms where billion-dollar decisions were debated. Yet she never forgot the courthouse corridors where her mother had quietly mopped floors long after midnight. Even now, sitting alone beside a dark highway, Danielle found herself thinking about Angela's hands. They had always been rough from years of cleaning chemicals and worn gloves. Yet somehow they felt gentle whenever they rested on Danielle's shoulders before an important exam or difficult interview. Her mother had never measured success by titles or salaries. She measured it by whether someone could look another person in the eye with kindness after gaining power. Danielle reached into the center console and switched her phone to silent mode after noticing 3 missed calls from the governor's executive office. She did not return them. She knew they were waiting for the legal documents resting inside the leather portfolio beside her. The sealed folder carried confidential revisions that could not be discussed over the phone, and every passing minute pushed the evening closer to the 8 o'clock deadline. Still, she refused to let urgency replace good judgment. Outside, Tyler Reed slowly walked another circle around the vehicle. His flashlight paused on the windshield permit, then the rear tires, then the closed portfolio visible through the passenger window. Ryan finally stepped back from the patrol car holding Danielle's license again, but something in his expression had changed. The uncertainty from moments earlier was gone. In its place was the quiet confidence of someone who believed he had found another reason to keep asking questions. Danielle noticed it immediately. She straightened ever so slightly in her seat, folded her hands once more over the steering wheel, and waited. Experience had taught her that the truth rarely arrived all at once. It revealed itself one decision at a time. Ryan stopped beside Danielle's window once again, holding her driver's license between 2 fingers as though he had discovered something worth questioning. The flashing lights reflected across the smooth plastic surface before he tucked it beneath a small notepad. "You said you were traveling for legal work," he said evenly. "Who exactly are you meeting this late?" Danielle looked directly at him. "I am delivering confidential legal documents." Ryan tilted his head. "Confidential for whom?" Danielle answered with the same measured tone she had maintained from the beginning. "I am not authorized to discuss the contents or the client." Tyler Reed let out a quiet laugh from the passenger side of the vehicle. "That sounds convenient." Danielle remained silent for a moment before speaking again. "Confidentiality is a professional obligation, not a convenience." Ryan's expression hardened just enough to reveal his growing irritation. He looked toward Tyler, then back at Danielle. "Please step out of the vehicle." Danielle did not argue. She slowly released her seat belt, announced every movement before making it, opened the driver's door, and stepped onto the shoulder with calm, deliberate movements. The warm evening breeze carried the scent of pine trees from the woods beyond the highway, while passing cars slowed slightly before continuing into the fading light. Danielle folded her hands loosely in front of her and waited. Ryan began another series of questions that seemed less connected than before. Where had she been earlier that afternoon? Why had she chosen this route? Why was she traveling alone? Did anyone know where she was? Each answer Danielle gave was brief, truthful, and professional. Yet every response appeared to generate another question rather than resolve the previous one. Tyler circled toward the passenger side again and pointed his flashlight through the window at the leather portfolio resting on the seat. "What is inside the case?" he asked. Danielle followed his gaze. "Legal documents." "May we see them?" Danielle gently shook her head. "The folder is sealed and contains privileged government material. I cannot open it without authorization." Ryan crossed his arms. "That sounds like something we should verify." Danielle met his eyes without raising her voice. "Officer, if you believe there is a lawful reason to inspect confidential state documents, I respectfully ask that you explain the legal basis before proceeding." For the first time since the stop began, neither officer answered immediately. Ryan looked toward Tyler again, and the brief exchange between them required no words. Danielle noticed the hesitation. She also noticed Ryan glance toward the patrol car computer, then back at her identification as though searching for something that would justify extending the stop. A few moments later, the radio clipped to Ryan's shoulder crackled softly with routine dispatch traffic from another district. He muted it almost immediately, unwilling to lose focus. Danielle quietly observed every detail. The time displayed on the patrol car dashboard, the unit number painted above the rear bumper, the name stitched onto both uniforms, the body cameras blinking with steady blue indicator lights. She was not building an argument. She was preserving facts exactly as they unfolded. Her law professors had often reminded students that memory could fade, but documented facts rarely did. Tyler leaned slightly closer to the passenger window again. "Mind if I take a closer look inside?" Danielle answered with the same calm confidence that had carried her through countless court hearings. "Officer, I do not consent to any search. If you have legal authority, you will act according to the law. If not, I respectfully ask that my constitutional rights be honored." The quiet confidence in her voice seemed to unsettle both officers more than anger ever could. Ryan slowly exhaled, glanced once more toward the sealed portfolio, and then reached for the radio clipped to his shoulder. This time, instead of dispatch, he requested additional information through official channels. As he waited for the response, the evening seemed to grow strangely still. Even the distant traffic faded into the background while Danielle stood patiently beneath the blinking blue lights, knowing that truth often arrived not with raised voices, but with a single unexpected message. Ryan lowered the radio from his shoulder after requesting additional information, but no immediate answer came back. The silence lingered just long enough to make the flashing lights seem louder against the darkening highway. Danielle stood beside her sedan with the same composed posture she had maintained since the stop began. She watched the breeze ripple through the tall grass beyond the guardrail, reminding herself that impatience often became the enemy of good judgment. Tyler took another slow walk around the vehicle before stopping beside the passenger door once more. His flashlight settled on the leather portfolio, lying exactly where Danielle had left it. Even through the window, the gold state seal embossed on the corner of the folder was faintly visible beneath the evening light. He pointed toward it. "That is the case you mentioned?" Danielle nodded. "Yes." "Unlock the passenger door." Danielle remained respectful. "Officer, I cannot voluntarily provide access to sealed government documents without legal authorization." Ryan stepped closer, his boots crunching softly against the gravel shoulder. "You seem very confident about what we can and cannot do." Danielle met his eyes without hesitation. "Confidence comes from understanding the law. It applies to all of us equally." Ryan folded his arms across his chest. "Sometimes people hide behind legal language." Danielle answered calmly. "Sometimes legal language protects constitutional rights." For a brief moment, neither officer spoke. The only sound came from the steady rhythm of passing traffic several hundred yards away. Ryan looked toward Tyler again before speaking more firmly. "Open the vehicle." Danielle inhaled slowly. She could feel the weight of the evening pressing against the quiet roadside, yet her voice never changed. "Officer Collins, I want to cooperate within the limits of the law. If you believe you have legal authority to access confidential state materials, I respectfully ask that you identify that authority before proceeding." Ryan's jaw tightened. He reached for the passenger door handle, only to discover it remained locked. Danielle had never moved toward the vehicle. She simply stood where she was, neither resisting nor assisting, allowing the legal process to define the next step rather than emotion. Tyler shifted uncomfortably. Maybe dispatch can verify who she is working for. Ryan gave a short nod, but kept his eyes fixed on Danielle. We will find out. He keyed his microphone once again. This time his voice carried a greater sense of urgency. He requested employment verification through state administrative records, emphasizing that the driver claimed to be transporting confidential legal documents connected to government business. Danielle listened quietly without interrupting. She knew exactly what those databases would show. Still, experience had taught her that information alone did not always erase assumptions. Sometimes people first had to confront the gap between what they believed and what was true. A cool gust of wind swept across the highway, carrying the scent of fresh rain somewhere in the distance. Danielle glanced briefly toward the western horizon where the last traces of sunlight disappeared behind rolling hills. 8 o'clock was approaching quickly. The governor's office would already be wondering why the documents had not arrived. Her phone vibrated once inside her purse before falling silent again. She made no attempt to answer it. Ryan noticed the vibration. Important call? Danielle answered honestly. Possibly. You are not going to answer? Not while I am participating in this stop. Ryan looked at her for another long moment, as though expecting frustration, anger, or fear to finally break through her calm exterior. None of it came. Instead, Danielle simply waited with quiet patience, hands folded loosely before her, eyes steady, breathing even. Then Ryan's shoulder radio suddenly crackled to life. The dispatcher sounded different this time. More careful, more deliberate. Unit 12, stand by. We are confirming information through the governor's office. Do not take further action until verification is complete. The words hung in the evening air. Ryan and Tyler exchanged a quick glance. Neither officer spoke. For the first time since the emergency lights had appeared behind Danielle's car, uncertainty no longer belonged to the woman standing on the shoulder. It belonged to the officers themselves. The dispatcher did not speak again for several long seconds. The open radio channel hissed softly beneath the steady pulse of the patrol car lights, leaving Ryan Collins staring at the microphone in his hand as though willing it to deliver a different answer. Danielle remained exactly where she was. She neither celebrated nor protested. She simply waited, knowing that facts often moved more slowly than assumptions. Tyler shifted his weight uneasily before breaking the silence. Maybe this is just taking longer than usual. Ryan nodded without much conviction. Maybe. Yet neither officer sounded certain anymore. The confidence that had carried the first 20 minutes of the stop had begun to dissolve into cautious hesitation. Ryan looked back at Danielle. You said these documents are for government business. Danielle answered quietly. Yes. How important are they? She glanced toward the leather portfolio still resting on the passenger seat. Important enough that every minute matters. Ryan followed her eyes to the folder. The faint gold state seal seemed more noticeable now under the alternating blue lights. Before he could respond, the radio crackled once more. Unit 12, dispatch to Unit 12. Ryan immediately lifted the microphone. Go ahead. The dispatcher's voice had become noticeably more formal. We have verified the driver's employment through state records. Additional confirmation is being completed directly through the governor's office. You are instructed to maintain the scene and await further communication. Ryan frowned. Maintain the scene? Affirmative. Do not access any government materials. Repeat, do not access any government materials until instructed. The transmission ended with another burst of static. Tyler looked toward Ryan with raised eyebrows. They have never said that before. Ryan did not answer. His eyes drifted back toward Danielle, who continued standing with remarkable composure despite the delay. She made no attempt to remind them what she had already explained. She simply allowed the official process to continue. The evening air cooled as darkness settled over the highway. The first stars appeared above the pine trees, faint but steady against the deepening blue sky. Danielle quietly thought about the conference room waiting in Raleigh. Governor Michael Harrison would already have assembled senior staff members for the final legal review. The emergency order could not move forward until every page inside the sealed portfolio had been examined one last time. The delay frustrated her, but frustration would not change the moment. Patience might. Her phone vibrated again inside her purse. This time the screen briefly illuminated through the leather opening before fading back to black. Ryan noticed the glow but said nothing. Instead, He looked toward his patrol vehicle as another transmission came through, louder than before. Unit 12, priority message. Ryan answered immediately. Unit 12 receiving. Stand by. You are being connected to Captain Laura Mitchell. Ryan straightened instinctively. Tyler did the same. A calm, authoritative voice replaced the dispatcher. Officer Collins, this is Captain Mitchell. Confirm the driver remains on scene. Confirmed, Captain. Has the sealed portfolio been opened? Ryan swallowed. Negative, Captain. Good. Leave it exactly where it is. Ryan exchanged another uneasy glance with Tyler. Captain, can you tell us what is happening? There was a brief pause before she answered. The governor's chief of staff is joining this call. You will receive instructions directly. Ryan's expression changed completely. The color seemed to drain from his face as the significance of those words settled over him. Tyler quietly lowered his flashlight until its beam rested harmlessly on the pavement. Danielle watched neither man with satisfaction nor resentment. Instead, she looked toward the horizon where the last traces of daylight had disappeared. Her mother had once told her that character revealed itself most clearly when someone finally realized they had judged another person too quickly. Standing beneath the flashing lights, Danielle wondered whether that moment had finally arrived. Captain Laura Mitchell's voice faded from the radio, replaced by a silence so complete that even the blinking emergency lights seemed quieter than before. Ryan Collins lowered the microphone slowly without realizing he was still holding his breath. Tyler Reed looked toward the empty highway, then back at Danielle, uncertain whether to speak or remain still. The warm evening had given way to a cooler breeze that carried the scent of approaching rain across the pine trees lining the roadside. Danielle quietly wrapped her light blazer a little closer around her shoulders. She did not shiver. She simply stood beneath the fading twilight with the same calm dignity she had carried from the beginning. The leather portfolio remained untouched on the passenger seat behind the locked door, illuminated now and then by alternating flashes of blue light. Through the windshield, its gold state seal reflected softly against the glass, almost glowing in the darkness. Danielle's thoughts drifted away from the patrol cars for just a moment. She remembered another evening years earlier when she had waited outside the courthouse for her mother to finish an overnight cleaning shift. The marble steps had still held the day's warmth, and Angela Brooks had sat beside her with 2 paper cups of hot chocolate from a vending machine that never seemed to work properly. Danielle had been frustrated after losing a statewide mock trial competition by a single point. She remembered asking her mother why doing everything right sometimes still felt so unfair. Angela had smiled gently before looking toward the courthouse doors where judges and attorneys continued leaving long after sunset. People will not always recognize your worth immediately, she had said. But never let someone else's opinion convince you to abandon your own character. The truth has a quiet way of arriving exactly when it is needed. Standing beside the highway now, Danielle found herself repeating those words silently. They slowed her heartbeat more effectively than any deep breath ever could. Across the shoulder, Ryan removed his cap for a brief moment and rubbed the back of his neck before placing it on again. His confidence had been replaced by something heavier, something that did not yet have a name. Tyler shifted awkwardly beside the patrol vehicle, avoiding Danielle's eyes for the first time that evening. Neither officer spoke. They simply waited beneath the rotating lights while distant headlights drifted past, like silent reminders that the rest of the world continued moving forward. Danielle looked up toward the clear night sky. The first bright stars had fully appeared now, scattered above the dark outline of the trees. Somewhere in Raleigh, conference room lights were probably still glowing inside the governor's office. Staff members would be reviewing schedules, preparing briefing folders, and watching the clock inch closer toward an important deadline. Danielle wished she could be there, but she also understood that some moments became larger than schedules. Sometimes the greatest legal lesson unfolded far from a courtroom. Her phone vibrated once again inside her purse before becoming still. This time she allowed herself a faint smile. Whoever was calling trusted that she would arrive eventually. Trust, she thought, was built over years but tested in moments exactly like this one. Suddenly, another radio transmission interrupted the quiet. It was not dispatch. It was a secure administrative channel. Ryan immediately straightened as the unfamiliar signal echoed through the patrol car speaker. Unit 12, this is Executive Protective Services. The governor's motorcade is 5 minutes from your location. Maintain your current position. The governor has requested that no further questions be asked until his arrival. Ryan stared silently at the speaker. Tyler's flashlight slipped slightly toward the ground before he quickly steadied it. Danielle closed her eyes for only a brief second, not from relief, but from gratitude that the truth had finally begun making its way down the same highway where doubt had first appeared. The distant glow of headlights appeared first, cresting the gentle rise in the highway like a quiet procession moving through the North Carolina night. Within seconds, the unmistakable outline of a state motorcade emerged from the darkness. Black sport utility vehicles traveled in perfect formation, their amber escort lights reflecting across the pavement without urgency, yet carrying an unmistakable sense of purpose. Ryan Collins instinctively stepped back from Danielle's sedan, while Tyler Reed lowered his flashlight completely. Neither officer said a word. The lead vehicle slowed before stopping several yards behind the patrol cars. One by one, the remaining vehicles came to a smooth halt. Doors opened almost simultaneously. Men and women in dark business attire stepped out with calm efficiency, scanning the area without creating unnecessary commotion. Finally, Governor Michael Harrison emerged from the second vehicle, adjusting the sleeve of his navy jacket as he walked toward the roadside. His expression was neither angry nor theatrical. It was composed, focused, and quietly concerned. He did not look first at the patrol officers. He walked directly toward Danielle. "Ms. Brooks," he said warmly, extending his hand, "I am sorry this delayed your evening." Danielle accepted the handshake with the same professionalism she had shown throughout the encounter. "Good evening, Governor." Harrison offered a small nod. "We have been trying to reach you for nearly half an hour. The legal review cannot begin without your recommendations." Danielle glanced briefly toward the leather portfolio inside her vehicle. "The documents are secure, Governor." "I never doubted they were," he replied. The simple exchange settled over the roadside more heavily than any raised voice could have. Ryan felt his stomach tighten. Tyler stared silently at the state seal displayed on one of the motorcade vehicles, as though finally recognizing how completely the situation had changed. Governor Harrison turned calmly toward the two officers. "Which one of you is Officer Collins?" Ryan stepped forward immediately. "Sir, that would be me." Harrison acknowledged him with a polite nod before speaking in the same measured tone he had used with Danielle. "Captain Mitchell informed me of the circumstances. I appreciate that the confidential materials remained unopened." Ryan swallowed. "Yes, Governor." Harrison looked briefly toward Danielle again before continuing. "Ms. Brooks serves as senior legal advisor to my office. Every document in that portfolio is protected under state confidentiality procedures. She was traveling directly to our executive briefing when this stop occurred." The words landed with quiet precision. Tyler slowly removed his cap, lowering his eyes toward the pavement. Ryan stood motionless, replaying every question, every assumption, every unnecessary delay in his mind. Harrison noticed neither satisfaction nor resentment in Danielle's expression. She had not interrupted him once. She had not demanded recognition. She had simply allowed the truth to speak for itself. The governor smiled faintly. "Danielle has spent her career protecting the integrity of this office. She has argued constitutional questions before state appellate courts, rewritten emergency legislation that protected thousands of residents, and advised my administration through some of the most difficult legal decisions we have faced." Ryan's face lost what little color remained. The woman he had repeatedly questioned without understanding now stood quietly beside him, showing the same patience she had displayed from the first minute of the stop. Harrison turned back toward Danielle. "Are the documents ready?" She answered with a small nod. "Yes, Governor. Every page has been reviewed." Harrison smiled. "Excellent. I knew I could count on you." Danielle unlocked the passenger door, carefully retrieved the sealed portfolio, and handed it to him with both hands. He accepted it respectfully, almost ceremonially, before thanking her once again. The night grew still. Even the emergency lights seemed less important now. No dramatic revelation had been necessary. No argument had won the moment. Quiet professionalism, unwavering patience, and simple truth had accomplished what emotion never could. Governor Harrison held the sealed portfolio beneath his arm before turning his attention back to Ryan Collins and Tyler Reed. His voice remained calm, but every word carried the quiet authority of someone accustomed to making difficult decisions without raising his tone. Officers, I believe you intended to perform your duties. That responsibility deserves respect. However, respect for the law also requires respect for the people it protects. Neither Ryan nor Tyler attempted to interrupt. The flashing patrol lights reflected across their polished badges while the night breeze moved gently through the nearby pine trees. Ryan slowly removed his cap and held it against his chest. Governor, Ms. Brooks, I owe both of you an apology. He looked directly at Danielle for the first time without suspicion in his eyes. I should have listened more carefully instead of assuming I already understood the situation. I continued asking questions after I had no clear reason to do so. That was my mistake. Tyler nodded quietly beside him. I followed the same path. I should have recognized that professionalism goes both ways. Danielle studied both men for a long moment. There was no anger in her expression, only the thoughtful calm that had never left her throughout the evening. She remembered countless conversations with her mother about moments exactly like this. Character was never measured by how someone acted when they held authority. It was measured by what they chose to do after discovering they had been wrong. Governor Harrison remained silent, allowing Danielle the space to answer for herself. She took one slow breath before speaking. Every person deserves to be treated with fairness before conclusions are made. That includes the people wearing the badge and the people standing beside the road. Ryan lowered his eyes briefly. Danielle continued with the same steady voice. I do not expect perfection from anyone. I do expect accountability. Tonight delayed important work, but I hope it also creates an opportunity to strengthen public trust. Tyler nodded almost immediately. It should. Ryan looked at Danielle again. I appreciate your patience more than you probably realize. Danielle offered a faint smile. Patience is easier when you believe the truth will eventually be heard. Governor Harrison smiled quietly as he listened. That is exactly why Danielle serves in my office. He turned toward Ryan once more. Captain Mitchell has already directed professional standards to review the body camera recordings, not simply to determine what happened tonight, but to identify how future encounters can better reflect both constitutional principles and public confidence. Accountability exists to improve institutions, not merely to assign blame. Ryan accepted the words with a respectful nod. I understand, Governor. Tyler answered just as quietly. So do I. The governor placed a reassuring hand on the leather portfolio before speaking again. Our state depends upon people who are willing to learn from difficult moments. That includes every public servant, whether they work inside this office, inside a courtroom, or inside a patrol vehicle. Danielle looked toward the patrol cars, where the blue emergency lights continued turning against the darkness with a rhythm that suddenly felt less intimidating than before. The same lights that had once represented uncertainty now simply illuminated a conversation that neither side would likely forget. Ryan stepped aside from the roadway and returned Danielle's driver's license with both hands. Ms. Brooks, you are free to continue your trip. I sincerely hope the rest of your evening is much smoother than the beginning. Danielle accepted the license with a grateful nod. Thank you, Officer Collins. I hope yours is as well. For a brief moment, no one spoke. The cool North Carolina air settled gently around them, carrying away the tension that had filled the roadside only minutes earlier. What remained was something quieter, something stronger, and perhaps far more lasting than either apology or authority alone could ever accomplish. Danielle Brooks eased herself back into the driver's seat and closed the door with a quiet click that seemed to separate one chapter of the evening from the next. The familiar scent of leather and paper filled the cabin as she rested her hands on the steering wheel for a brief moment before starting the engine. Ahead of her, Governor Michael Harrison climbed back into his vehicle with the sealed portfolio resting safely beside him. The motorcade slowly pulled onto the highway, and Danielle followed several car lengths behind, the flashing patrol lights growing smaller in her rearview mirror until they disappeared into the darkness altogether. The rest of the drive to Raleigh passed beneath a sky scattered with bright stars, the roads calm and nearly empty. When Danielle arrived at the governor's executive residence, members of the legal staff were already waiting near the entrance. No one complained about the delay. Instead, they welcomed her with quiet appreciation, understanding that the documents she carried represented weeks of careful work affecting communities across the state. Governor Harrison entered the conference room holding the portfolio, before looking toward Danielle with a grateful smile. Now we can begin. The legal review continued well into the night. Every page was examined with the same precision Danielle had become known for throughout her career. Just after midnight, the final revisions were approved, and the emergency order was prepared for signature the following morning. As the meeting concluded, Governor Harrison paused before leaving the room. "Danielle," he said, "thank you for protecting both the law and the dignity of this office tonight." She smiled softly. "I simply did my job, Governor." "You did much more than that," he replied before quietly walking away. Several days later, Captain Laura Mitchell completed the administrative review of the roadside encounter. The body camera recordings confirmed that Danielle had remained respectful, cooperative, and professional from beginning to end. The review also identified opportunities for additional constitutional training and communication procedures during traffic stops involving confidential government responsibilities. Rather than becoming a story about punishment, the incident became part of a statewide professional development program emphasizing fairness, respectful communication, and equal treatment under the law. Ryan Collins attended every session voluntarily. He listened more than he spoke, taking notes during discussions led by experienced legal instructors and community leaders. Tyler Reed did the same. Months later, Ryan encountered another driver during a routine traffic stop on a quiet country road. Before asking a single question, he introduced himself politely, explained the reason for the stop clearly, and listened carefully to every response without interruption. When the encounter ended, the driver thanked him for treating them with respect. Ryan watched the vehicle disappear down the highway and quietly remembered the woman whose patience had changed far more than one difficult evening. On a cool autumn afternoon, Danielle visited the old courthouse where her mother had spent so many years working. The marble floors still reflected the afternoon sunlight exactly as they had during her childhood. She carried a small bouquet of white lilies and placed them beside a bronze memorial bench dedicated to longtime public employees. Sitting there for a moment, she looked toward the courthouse entrance and almost imagined seeing Angela Brooks walking through the doors wearing her familiar gray uniform and warm smile. Danielle whispered the words her mother had repeated throughout her life. "Knowledge is the one thing nobody can take away from you." Then she added a quiet sentence of her own. "Neither is kindness." She stood, adjusted her blazer, and walked slowly down the courthouse steps as golden leaves drifted across the sidewalk in the gentle October breeze. Behind her, sunlight reflected from the courthouse windows like a quiet promise that truth did not need to shout in order to be heard. Sometimes it simply waited with patience until the world was finally ready to see it.